The Bottle Cap Mosaic project began on a footpath in Ajijic, Mexico. But before we go there, let me give you some background. My name is Scott Gordon Wills. I'm an artist living and working in Chicago. About 20 years ago, I built a studio in my garage and started making art there. I worked in traditional sculpture media, metal, wood, stone. The classical sculptors of the ancient Mediterranean, medieval, and Renaissance Europe were my main influences, and I was inspired by myth, Jungian symbols, and the expressive possibilities of the figure. I became interested in incorporating light with sculpture and began to change direction in my work to a much more abstract vision. I gathered branches from the trees in my yard and began to fashion them into loose basket shapes. Onto this wood framework, I'd sew handmade or synthetic paper to form a translucent skin. Sometimes I'd photograph the sculpture and experiment with color combinations on the computer, and then paint the paper with translucent dyes. The Mexican Fine Arts Museum in Chicago is a treasure that has inspired and enlivened me for many years with the rich history and culture of Mexico. I went there to study the ancient tradition of working with papel mal hecho and became enamored of the theatrical fiesta figures called moquingangas. I tried my hand at making one and started making more sculptures with paper mache, eventually combining them with light. I decided I needed to go to Mexico to learn more about papel mal hecho. The beautiful town of Ajijic lies a few miles south of Guadalajara on the shore of Lake Chapala. I had been in correspondence with a paper mache artisan who lived nearby, and I traveled there to meet him. Sadly, that meeting never took place, but I learned a lot while I was there. Every day, my wife Betsy and I would walk the beautiful Malecón along the lake, from our lodgings to the north end of town where our friends lived. Along the way, we admired the beautiful artwork that adorned the Malecón: sculptures, murals, mosaics. Eventually, the pavement ends in a dirt footpath along the lake, traveled by townspeople and their livestock and by local fishermen. As I walked the footpath, I noticed hundreds of plastic bottle caps discarded by walkers on the path. I wanted to be a good neighbor, so I began picking them up. While I was staying in Ajijic, I learned about El Pescado Blanco, the Lake Chapala whitefish, which had thrived for centuries in the lake, and provided sustenance for native inhabitants for generations. The whitefish is nearly extinct now, destroyed by human actions and invasive species. Sadly, the lake is badly polluted. Discarded plastics were everywhere. On the Mexican seashore, plastics from all over the world washed up on the beautiful beaches. There was no escaping the environmental impact or the lack of awareness that led to it. I continued picking up bottle caps as I traveled around Mexico. When I returned home, I had a big bag full of bottle caps. I thought, I'll bet I could make some art out of these. Maybe a mosaic. On the streets of Chicago, I continued my bottle cap collecting. When the cap was still connected to a bottle, I kept the cap and recycled the rest. I began to think about how to turn the bottle caps into mosaics. First, I made some sketches, and then I brought them into a computer to help me visualize a pattern for the mosaic. I remembered the whitefish of Lake Chapala and decided to make a mosaic lit from within to honor this vanishing creature. I called the finished mosaic Ghostfish and displayed it at the first gallery showing of my light sculptures. From making the Ghostfish, I learned that a bottle cap mosaic needs to be large in order to show detail and variety in the colors and forms. I realized that I'd need a lot of bottle caps to make the next mosaics, more than I could possibly gather by myself. Then I remembered a display I'd seen in a bus station in Mexico City. A local organization was collecting the bright-colored caps to benefit cancer patients. This gave me an idea. I made a mosaic sign, took a picture of it, and made a flyer from that. Then I sent it out to friends and neighbors, asking them to save their plastic caps, pick them up from the street, and bring or send them to me. I placed collection boxes at my church and at the office where I was working, and people began to contribute bottle caps. Before long, the boxes began to fill up. It was becoming a real community project. Packages full of bottle caps began to arrive from all over the country, from New York City to California. My friend Vinny Zumo in New York sent me dozens of boxes. Thanks, Vinny. People told me that the idea of picking up the caps stuck with them and became a habit as they walked about. This gave me hope that maybe the project could have a positive impact on people's environmental awareness, even if only a small one. With all these bottle caps piling up, I needed to prepare them for making them into mosaics. Some were covered with dirt from the ground, and some still had food or liquid sticking to them. These had to be cleaned. Next, I needed to sort the caps by size and color so that they could become part of the palette I'd be working with to make a mosaic. As I sorted, I took note of the anonymous stories the collected bottle caps told, of eating and drinking habits, housekeeping and hygiene practices, manufacturing processes. Even with my small-scale collection, the volume of the bottle caps was staggering. At last, I felt I had enough variety of color and size to start making more mosaics. For my first large-scale mosaic, I settled on making another fish. This time a fish known to every American schoolchild, one that I used to fish for as a boy, the bluegill. In order to visualize the colors for the mosaic, I looked to pointillism for inspiration. Pointillism was first developed as a painting technique by Georges Seurat, a 19th century French artist often associated with the Impressionists. What Seurat did was to borrow the newly developed technique of color printing and apply it to his paintings. He separated the colors of the spectrum into tiny dots of paint. When he placed them next to each other, they created the impression of additional colors when viewed at a distance. This same concept could apply to bottle caps. With my reference photo of a bluegill as a guide, I found a cast-off hunk of foam insulation in a dumpster and sketched the shape of the fish onto it. Then I cut out the shape with a jigsaw and made a frame out of strips cut from discarded cardboard boxes soaked in glue. To fill in gaps in the frame, I made a mixture of paper pulp from shredded office paper, combined with glue, chalk dust, and water. When it dried, it made a very hard, durable surface which I sanded smooth. To finish the frame, I tore strips of brown paper, dipped them into my papier-mâché glue mixture, and smoothed them onto the cardboard. Then I primed and painted the frame. Once the frame was finished and the mosaic surface prepared, I tried a rough placement of the mosaic caps to get a sense of how the colors and shapes might go together. It looked like it might work, so I began to glue the caps into place. I tried many different adhesives to see which worked the best for future reference. Slowly, cap by cap, the mosaic began to appear. When all the bottle caps were attached, it was time to apply a grout to fill in between them. Conventional mosaic grout is cement, much like the one used between bathroom tiles. It's hard, heavy, and rigid. I needed something much lighter and more flexible. I also was committed to using cast-off and recycled materials as much as possible. I went back to my little makeshift chemistry lab and mixed up several combinations of materials to make a grout. I made test boards with bottle caps to see how the different mixtures would behave. All the while, I took notes and referred to them as I chose the mix I would use on the mosaic. Applying the grout involved a lot of trial and error, and there was plenty of error. But eventually, I found the right mix and a process that worked. Once all the grout had been placed between the caps, the entire surface had to be cleaned and leveled so the color of the caps could come through. The last touch was to add light. I used LED rope lights to follow the fish's outline to create an aura on the wall when the mosaic was displayed. Betsy helped me flip the fish over and load it into our van for its first trip out. The first stop was at Lake Forest Friends Meeting House, where many folks had contributed caps to the cause. It was really fun and satisfying to share the results of their contributions. Next, the big fish stopped by Tom Robinson's studio gallery, where Tom and members of our art community had all saved and contributed caps. Finally, Big Bluegill was installed for display at Erie Family Health Center, Chicago, where my co-workers had taken part in the bottle cap collection. I have enough bottle caps to make a few more mosaics, but there's still plenty of plastic out there. I hope that other artists will find creative ways to take it from the natural environment and city streets and use it to make beautiful art.